Hey, what's up, John Sonmez from SimpleProgrammer.com. So I got a question about willpower, about ego depletion, willpower. This is one of those topics that I love to hate because I'm really against the idea of willpower being a finite resource. And I realize there's a lot of research on this topic, but there's actually been research that counters this as well. So I want to talk about this a little bit, and I'll answer the question here from Nathan. And he says, for most people, willpower is a finite resource, but others seem to have an infinite willpower. I recall you saying that willpower is not a finite resource, yet for most people it is. Let's talk about this. And maybe it is for most people, but it's their own fault. Okay, so he says, in psychology it's called ego depletion and is shown in repeated studies. What can someone do to not fall to it that can be taught and repeated? Additional info. The psychological studies on ego depletion is done by splitting people into two groups. One has to exercise willpower for a length of time, the other does not. Afterwards, both groups then have to perform a task, often one that is somewhat mentally demanding and requires attention to detail. The groups that had to exercise willpower before perform worse. These studies show people's willpower being used up. Yes and no, okay? So it's interesting, these kind of studies, they're really dumb, these kind of studies, right? I've read every study about this, just about, right? There was a study, the famous one is the marshmallow test, right? To see if kids can have deferred gratification, if they can have, either one marshmallow or two marshmallows, or forget, what it is. We're all probably pretty familiar with that test, and then they follow these kids later on in life, and the ones who had deferred gratification were more successful. Okay, that doesn't really talk about willpower, but it kind of does, right? It doesn't talk about the depletion of willpower. But then there's this test where they basically wanted to see if blood sugar contributes to willpower depletion. So one group, gets Kool-Aid or lemonade with sugar in it. The other one does not. They're asked to do a bunch of math tests, right? And the ones that had the sugar did better. They were able to focus more or concentrate more or do more of the problems, right? And they've done all kinds of studies like this. They put a bowl in front of someone, and one group of people had like healthy vegetables, and one of them had cookies, and the ones that were resisting the cookies or whatever, they performed worse on logic problems or math problems or something like that, right? So there's been studies that, and I'm familiar with these studies, right? So I've seen all of this argument, but there's also been studies, there's been an argument that says that it's bullshit, okay? So what is it? Is it bullshit or is it not? Have you ever had a hard day? Okay. Is your willpower less when you have had a hard day? Right. If you've gone through a lot of shit, it's been a tough day, are you more likely to make poor decisions, right? And why do you make those poor decisions? Is it because there's this finite resource, willpower, you've got like a hit point meter and it's been used up in your brain, it's been sucked down? Or is it because you justify things in your head, right? I did this video on justification. You should watch that video. And that's more likely the case, right? So I don't believe that willpower is a finite resource. I don't think that your willpower actually gets depleted. I think what ends up happening is that the more shit that happens to you for the bad, the worse mood that you're in, the worse kind of judgment calls that you make, and the less likely you are to feel motivated, right? And it can be also energy level, right? I mean, if you're exhausted, if you're tired, if you're sleepy, right, you don't feel like doing things. You don't feel like making hard choices, right? You may be tired. That doesn't mean that you don't have an unlimited supply of willpower, right? And the reason why I would tell you this, okay, is because I guarantee you, I've been doing some studying on long distance running. I've been training. I ran a marathon a few weeks ago, and just a self-supported marathon. And I've been running 40 miles a week, and I've been studying some of these long distance runners. And I guarantee you that someone who runs like 70, 80 miles a day, there's a lot of guys out there that have done these crazy races, these ultra marathons, races, and these guys that have done like 10-day races where they're running 78 miles a day. There's a guy that ran across the entire country that was running, I think, 70 miles a day. if willpower were depleted, were possibly to be depleted, they would have had their willpower depleted. And it's not just like a physical, if you think about it, right? If you've ever run, like just this Sunday, I did a 20-mile run, okay? That's friggin' 4 hours of fucking running. That is hard, okay? And it's not just physically hard, it's mentally hard. The problem is like 4 hours of fucking running is boring as shit. I don't care if you listen to audiobooks, I don't care what you're doing, 4 hours is boring as shit, right? So it's not just a physical depletion, right? A lot of people say, well, yeah, they've trained for this. Yeah. Okay, run 70 miles. Do you know how many hours of running that is? It's not fun. Your brain does not enjoy that, right? There's, especially day after day. So they have incredible willpower, right? Beyond, if there was a depletion, it would have been gone, okay? There's no way that they could possibly survive on a finite resource such as willpower unless they increase their willpower to such a degree. But you see some of these guys and they don't have the willpower in other areas of their life to achieve it. What they've learned to do is to not rely on willpower, or not to rely on willpower as a finite resource, but just to realize that they have an unlimited supply, that it's never a question of how much willpower do you have left. It's always a question of, do you exercise that willpower or not, right? If you're driving a car, right? A lot of people say, oh, I don't have any fucking control over it. I just can't control it. I can't control my actions. I can't, I just spaz out and I do this stupid thing. Okay, yeah. But if you're driving a car, how often when you're driving a car do you just decide, I can't control my actions. I'm going to go over the yellow line and go into the ongoing traffic. It doesn't happen, right? If you think about a steering wheel on a car, okay? A slight shift this direction and you're dead. A slight shift this direction and you're dead. That's how little it is. Just 2 seconds of this and you're done. That's it. So how many people, not that people don't get in accidents, but how many people competently drive cars and they never, ever, never, no matter what the urge is, they never do this. They never twitch and do this, right? And kill themselves, right? I mean, some people do, but a majority of people don't. So what I'm saying is that it's about the stakes. It's about what you decide and the rules that you define for yourself, right? You can achieve impossible things. You can have impossible amounts of willpower if that's what your set point is. I did this video on set points, right? You can check out that video. But if that's what your standard is, right? So I always say 9 or above. Why 9 or above? 9 or above, it's not just the effort that you put in, it's the standard that you set. And so if your standards are really high, right, then you can achieve what seems impossible to someone who has lower standards, who hasn't performed at those standards. But once you reach that level, and once you're performing at that level and that becomes the standard, it doesn't require as much willpower. It just seems like such a big hurdle to say, oh, this amazing thing, right? When I was running, honestly, to use the running example, when I was running 5Ks, right, 3 miles 3 times a week, the idea of just doing a 10-mile run, just doing one 10-mile run, seemed insane. It seemed crazy. A half marathon, 13.1 miles, insane. A full marathon, that's absolutely insane. Running for 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours, insane, not possible. How could anyone do it, right? But when I started upping my mileage, right, and this within the last year, and I started running, 10-mile runs, and now I'm running 40 miles a week. And when I run those 40 miles a week, I do it every single fucking week, right? So that's the standard. And because that's a standard, it doesn't take that much willpower. I'm about to go for a run now. I'm going to go run 10 miles, and that's just what I do, right? It's just, it doesn't even, it's not that it's not hard anymore, but because it's a standard, it's what I have to do. And you'll see this work the opposite way too, right? If you take someone who was a hard worker, who was working a job, and I think I've talked about this before, but if you take away their job and they start slacking off and they're sleeping in till noon every day and they're just like, they don't have any responsibilities and they're just doing whatever they want to do, just showing up for a regular cush job, like an easy job, just a part-time job, 4 hours a day, it will become hell for them. It will become hell. I trust me. You will adapt and it will become hell, and it will require, you'll be like, man, how could anyone work 8 hours a day? Working 4 is so damn hard, right? Because you will adapt to that. So for them, in their mindset, if they did that, they would say, man, it takes so much willpower to be able to work 8 hours. But there's guys that work 12 hours, 20 hours a day. I mean, hell, Elon Musk, right? That guy, I was just reading his biography, I'll do a review on that, but he was working insane, ridiculous hours. And you might say, well, that guy, he must have cracked the willpower thing. No, he didn't crack the willpower thing. He doesn't have a bigger reserve than anyone. What he did was he set the standard. That was the standard. He started doing it. And once you start doing it, then it becomes normal. And then once it becomes normal, it becomes a standard. And then you just keep on doing it. You just keep on performing that level. That's what you see in any kind of superior athlete, anyone who's doing like phenomenal type of things that just seem Herculean efforts that are way bigger than what you could do, or that require so much focus or so much willpower, so much discipline. They basically set the standard, they get there, and they do it for long enough time that it becomes the standard, becomes the bottom, right? A lot of people like that, what their lowest point is what someone else's highest point is, but it's all about standards. So in answering this question, right, about willpower, how could you do this? How could you essentially have this, make willpower a non-finite, an infinite resource, right? First of all, get rid of the illusion of willpower. There's no such fucking thing as willpower. It's either you're doing something or you're not doing it, right? It's choices, it's judgment. So first of all, get rid of as many judgment calls as possible. That's why I make rules for myself. I think I did a video on rules, creating rules for yourself. It's really, really important. I've got rules on my fucking wall that tell me what I'm supposed to do, right? And I follow those rules. I've always governed myself, especially being someone who was diagnosed with ADHD. I have to have rules, okay? I eliminate judgment calls because I make bad judgment calls. We all fucking do. We make bad judgment calls. So you got to eliminate that by having rules. So that's number one. The less judgment calls, the less willpower that's required, because it's easier to follow a rule than to make a judgment call, right? I eat 1 meal a day. It's easier for me to fast all day than to choose a healthy breakfast and lunch. Now, that's not the reason why I necessarily eat 1 meal a day, but that does contribute to it. It makes things easier, right? It's actually easier to eat less than it is to eat more, right? Because you have to make more judgment calls. So that's number one. Number two is to set the standard higher, okay? The first time when I started running 10 miles every run and started running 40 miles a week, I just set the standard. I just said 1 week after I'd finished a half marathon, and I said, you know what, from now on, I'm just running 10 miles every time, and I'm going to start training 4 days a week instead of 3. And I just started doing it. And the first week was hell, and the second week was hell. And by the third week, I was like, I just live in hell. No, it's not that bad. It's pretty bad, but that's it. But then that becomes a standard, and once that's the standard, then you're not going to go below the standard, right? That's just how it is, right? Hitting the gym, training, lifting weights for 2 hours, that's the standard. That's what I do. Eating 1 meal a day, that's the standard, right? So all of these things that seem crazy, it's just because I was crazy enough to set the standard, do it long enough that it sticks, and then that becomes the thing. You adapt to that thing, and that's how you do it. So that's what it takes. That's how to take the willpower thing and turn it into an infinite resource instead of finite resource. So many people are stuck in this whole thing. And those tests that they do, psychological tests and stuff, okay, sure. I'm not doubting the results there. They're getting results from those tests. But does it have to do with some magical willpower being a finite resource, or does it have to do with when people are in a bad mood, they make worse decisions? That's the answer. Or when they don't have a standard, they don't have rules for themselves, people just make shitty decisions, right? So if you want someone to make a good decision, when conditions are ideal, people make better decisions. Oh, wow, that's amazing research, isn't that? That, like, I couldn't have figured that out on my own, but when you make conditions bad for someone, they make worse decisions. Well, that happens to all of us. But the way that we avoid that is, like I said, we have higher standards, and we create rules for ourselves. We create systems that make it so that we can't fail and that we're able to achieve what we want to. Because hell, every single day, I don't know how I'm gonna fucking feel tomorrow. I might wake up tomorrow and be like, shit, I don't want to do any of this stuff. I don't want to do YouTube videos. I don't want to do simple programmer stuff, right? But because I have a rule on my board that says record 2 videos today, dumbass, I'm gonna do it. I didn't feel like recording the videos today. Okay, to be honest with you, I was like, I'll do it later. Now, No, you got to do it, okay? And that's how you do it. That's the standard. I mean, that's some of you say, how do you record 2 to 3 videos a day? That's how, because I set a standard, I set a bar, I said, this is what I'm doing, and I'm doing it. It doesn't require willpower, it requires commitment and dedication. That's a different thing. All right, if you like this video, if you're committed, if you want to overcome the struggles that you have in your life and you want to improve and you want to join me on the journey as I'm doing the same, click that subscribe button, join the Simple Programmer community. I'd love to have you, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care.